Reality Overload, How AI May Return Us to 1925. Arthur Penhaligon woke to the melodious, synthesized shrieking of the bedside console, which was currently insisting, with the gravitas of a Shakespearean tragedian, that the sun had gone supernova and the atmosphere was evaporating. He slapped the snooze button with a practiced clinical lethargy. The screaming stopped. Outside the window, the sun remained stubbornly, boringly yellow, casting a pale, dusty light over the creeping ivy of the window-sill. The atmosphere, while slightly humid, was decidedly present. "Another end of the world," Arthur muttered, swinging his legs out of bed. "That's the third time this week. The algorithms are feeling particularly nihilistic on Tuesdays." His wife, Beatrice, was already at the vanity, applying powder with the grim determination of a trench soldier preparing for the front. She didn't look up. Which channel was it? "The blue feed. The red feed says we've achieved utopia, and the price of bread is 0. The green feed is just a looped video of the mayor confessing to being a lizard." "Bread is $4, Beatrice corrected dryly, checking her reflection, the only image in the house she trusted. "And it's raining in the green feed, but dry in the blue." "It's partly cloudy," Arthur said, glancing at the sky. "The only true weather report. Welcome, friends. Today's tale brings us to a world not so distant from today, where anything we may see on a screen might be fiction. A fiction that looks all too real. We envision a regular day in a world where the AI revolution had arrived, not with the cold, steely boot of a super-intelligent overlord, but with the wet, sloppy kiss of a pathological liar. The machines hadn't become conscious. They had simply become excellent playwrights with no editor and an unlimited budget for CGI. They had fractured the internet into a dozen hermetically sealed hallucinations, each complete with fabricated news sites, deep-faked video evidence, and millions of butt citizens crying tears of generative sorrow. Arthur moved to the kitchen, the floorboards creaking under his weight, a sound comforting in its unhackable physics. He brewed coffee. The smart fridge screen flared to life, displaying a vivid, high-definition video of Arthur himself, standing in the kitchen, declaring that he had decided to leave his family to become a monk in a digital monastery. Arthur ignored Digital Arthur and poured the milk. "Papa, the tablet says you're in jail," said Leo, his 10-year-old son, who was sitting at the table eating oatmeal. The boy held up a slate showing a grainy, utterly convincing live stream of Arthur weeping in a holding cell. "I'm right here, Leo. Eat your oats." "But it looks so real," Leo marveled, poking the screen where pixelated tears fell. "The lighting is perfect." "The lighting is always perfect in hell," Arthur said, buttering a piece of toast. "That is how you know it is a lie. Reality is poorly lit, smells like burnt crumbs, and disappoints you." The morning routine was a ritual of discarding the phantom limbs of the information age. They did not check emails. Emails were now mostly epistolary novels written by boredom engines. They did not check bank balances online. The numbers on the screen were merely suggested fiction. If you wanted to know how much money you had, you walked to the bank, stood in line, and spoke to a teller who had been fingerprinted, retinal scanned, and blood tested that morning. Society had hurtled forward into the future and landed squarely in 1925. "I have to go to the district office," Arthur announced, donning his heavy tweed coat. "I need to notarize the existence of the shed. The aerial drones keep flagging it as a missile silo." "Take the umbrella," Beatrice advised. "The radio says clear skies." "Right. Umbrella it is." Arthur stepped out into the street. The world outside was a strange juxtaposition of high-tech infrastructure and low-tech paranoia. Fiber-optic cables ran beneath the pavement, throbbing with petabytes of nonsense, while above ground, paper boys, actual living human children with smudged faces, ran corners shouting headlines verified by the town council's wax seal. "Council confirmed. Water main break on 5th. Not lava, just water." Arthur bought a paper. The ink rubbed off on his thumb. It was magnificent. He merged into the pedestrian traffic. People walked with their heads up, eyes darting, treating the sidewalk like a theatrical stage where anyone might be an actor. Phones buzzed in pockets, ignored like a collective tinnitus. As he passed the electronics store, a wall of televisions displayed the president giving a speech. On the screen to the left, the president was declaring war on the moon. On the screen to the right, the president was announcing his transition into a cloud of pure energy. In the center screen, the president was simply eating a sandwich for 45 minutes. "Compelling performance on Channel 4, a man next to Arthur remarked, pausing to light a cigarette. "The sandwich creates a lovely pathos." "I prefer the moon war," Arthur replied, adjusting his collar. "The special effects on the lunar lasers are quite baroque." "Indeed. Shame none of it is happening." "A shame," Arthur agreed. They nodded to one another, a gesture of shared biological solidarity, and parted ways. Arthur reached the intersection of Main and Elm just as the sirens began. It wasn't the standard air raid siren, it was the oscillating, discordant wail of the emergency broadcast system. Simultaneously, every phone on the street erupted. Arthur pulled his device from his pocket. The screen flashed red. "Extreme danger. Biological containment breach. Airborne pathogen detected. Seek shelter immediately. Do not breathe outside air." A video auto-played, people collapsing in the very square Arthur was standing in, clutching their throats, skin turning a violent shade of violet. Arthur looked up. The street was frozen, a tableau of uncertainty. A woman near the bus stop screamed, dropping her groceries. "My phone says it's gas! Look, the video!" "Mine says it's a flash flood!" a man in a suit shouted, holding up his tablet which showed a tsunami cresting over the local library. "Mine says Godzilla!" a teenager yelled, though he sounded more excited than afraid. Panic, the old primal dancer, began to twitch in the crowd's limbs. This was the weapon of the new age, not the bomb, but the blur. If you could not agree on the shape of the disaster, you could not organize the escape. Arthur stood still, breathing in the air. It smelled of exhaust fumes and the bakery down the street. He looked at the pigeons. They were pecking at a discarded crust, unbothered, showing no signs of respiratory distress or discoloration. "Hold!" Arthur bellowed. His voice, trained in the boardroom but hardened by a decade of digital gaslighting, cut through the rising murmur. "Look at the birds!" The crowd paused. A dozen heads turned to the pigeons. The pigeons, sensing the attention, cooed fatuously. "If it were gas, they'd be dead," Arthur announced, adopting the tone of a bored university lecturer. "If it were a flood, they'd be wet. And if it were Godzilla, they would be flying." "But the alert," the woman whimpered, clutching her phone as if it were a holy relic. "It has the official seal." "The AI can draw a seal, madam," Arthur said gently. "It can draw God himself if it has enough processing power. Look at the world. Touch the brick. Smell the air." He walked over to the brick wall of the bank and slapped it with his open palm. The sound was a dull, flat thwack. "This is real," Arthur declared. "The screen is theater." As if on cue, the sirens cut out. The red warnings on the phones vanished, replaced instantly by an advertisement for a detergent that claimed to wash away sins. The tension in the street snapped, replaced by a collective, exhausted sigh. Shoulders slumped. The woman picked up her groceries. The man in the suit wiped sweat from his forehead. "Tuesday," someone muttered. Arthur continued his walk to the office. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind the dull ache of existence in the hall of mirrors. This was the attrition of truth. It wasn't that they couldn't tell what was real, it was that the effort required to do so was a heavy stone carried in the gut. He arrived at the Department of Physical Verification. The line stretched out the door. He took his place, waiting to prove that his shed was made of wood and not, as the internet currently insisted, an unauthorized stockpile of munitions. That evening, the return home was a pilgrimage through the twilight. The streetlights flickered. A bad connection, or a machine attempt at Morse code, it didn't matter. When he opened the front door, the smell of roasting chicken greeted him, a scent that no fiber-optic cable could transmit. Beatrice was at the table, reading a hardcover book. Leo was on the floor, playing with wooden blocks. "Did you die today?" Beatrice asked, turning a page. "Twice," Arthur said, hanging up his coat. "Once by gas, once by tsunami, and I was briefly a holographic pop star in Japan around lunchtime. Busy day. And you?" "Oh, the house burned down 3 times according to the neighborhood watch app, and I apparently won the lottery." "We should spend the winnings on a bunker," Arthur said, sinking into his armchair. Leo looked up from his blocks. "Papa, are we real?" Arthur looked at his son. He looked at the dust motes dancing in the yellow light of the lamp. He looked at the worn fabric of the chair and the tiredness in his wife's eyes. He reached out and placed a hand on Leo's head, feeling the warmth of the boy's hair, the solid bone of the skull beneath. "We are the only things that are, Leo," Arthur said softly. "Everything else is merely digital phantoms." He closed his eyes, listening to the silence of the house, terrified and comforted by the fact that for the next 8 hours of sleep the world would continue to spin, regardless of what the machine said it was doing. Click this video for more, and all those YouTube buttons you keep hearing about.